We know all. In this technique, the interrogator subtly convinces the source that their questioning is merely a formality because all information is already known. Detailed information is provided, and the interrogator often answers their own questions when the source hesitates. This approach relies on the interrogator possessing a vast amount of pre-existing information committed to memory. File and dossier. The interrogator equips themselves with a comprehensive dossier, fully organized and indexed with tabs covering various aspects of the source's life, such as education, employment, criminal record, and military service. This dossier serves as a tool to reinforce the impression that all details are already known, similar to the "we know all" approach. Establish your identity. The subject is informed that they have been identified as a notorious individual wanted for serious charges by higher authorities. Despite the interrogator's denials, the subject may attempt to correct this mistake, potentially providing valuable leads for further investigation. Repetition. The interrogator carefully listens to the source's answers and then repeats both the question and answer multiple times. This repetitive process aims to induce boredom in the source, leading them to answer questions more fully and candidly. Rapid fire. One or more interrogators bombard the source with a rapid succession of questions, allowing minimal time for complete responses. This tactic aims to confuse the source, leading to contradictions in their answers that can be explored further. Silence. The interrogator maintains a silent demeanor, making prolonged eye contact with the source while wearing a slight smile. This silence and unwavering gaze often prompt the source to break eye contact first, leading to feelings of discomfort and potential self-revelation. Change of scenery. Moving the interrogation from a formal setting can create a sense of departure from the questioning for the source. Conversation is steered towards the desired topic, and the source may not realize they are still under interrogation, potentially divulging valuable information in a more relaxed environment. Mr. Big. The Mr. Big technique, also known as the Canadian technique, is a covert method used by undercover police to extract confessions from suspects, particularly in unsolved cases like murders. In this procedure, the police conduct prolonged surveillance on the suspect, often spanning weeks, to understand their personality and routines. Subsequently, they orchestrate an elaborate scenario where an undercover operative interacts with the suspect under the guise of chance encounters. Initially, the operative may ask for minor favors, such as help lifting something up, gradually building rapport by offering gifts, meals, and even employment opportunities. As the relationship progresses, the suspect is gradually drawn into fictitious criminal activities, performing tasks like handling money or making deliveries. This involvement escalates over time, with the suspect being portrayed as an emerging figure within the criminal organization. Eventually, the suspect is introduced to Mr. Big, portrayed as the leader of the criminal organization. In reality, Mr. Big is a skilled police interrogator who employs a mix of inducements and threats to elicit a confession. Mr. Big may claim to possess incriminating evidence obtained from the police, necessitating the suspect's confession to protect the organization. Mr. Big may offer to manipulate evidence or frame someone else to resolve the situation, and the final encounter is typically recorded for evidentiary purposes. Good cop, bad cop. The good cop, bad cop technique, also known informally as the Mutt and Jeff approach, involves a duo employing contrasting methods when dealing with a subject. The bad cop adopts an aggressive and negative demeanor, making direct accusations, using derogatory language, issuing threats, and fostering hostility with the subject. This paves the way for the good cop to act compassionately, showing support and understanding, and generally displaying empathy towards the subject. The good cop defends the subject from the bad cop's hostility. The subject may feel inclined to cooperate with the good cop, either due to trust or fear of the bad cop, seeking refuge in the good cop, and providing the sought-after information to the interrogators. Reid Technique. The Reid Technique is a structured approach comprising 3 phases: fact analysis, behavior analysis interview, and, if appropriate, the Reid 9-step interrogation process. Interrogation is only recommended when evidence and investigative interviews suggest the subject's involvement in the crime. During the Reid Technique, interrogation is accusatory, with the investigator informing the suspect of evidence indicating their guilt. The interrogation is typically a monologue rather than a dialogue, with the investigator maintaining a demeanor of understanding and patience. The goal is to gradually encourage the suspect to admit the truth by presenting psychological justifications for their actions. For instance, an admission of guilt might be prompted by asking whether the crime was planned or spontaneous, employing an alternative question based on an assumption of guilt. The 9 steps of interrogation in the Reid Technique include: 1. Positive confrontation. The investigator informs the suspect of the evidence pointing to their guilt, offering the suspect an early opportunity to explain their actions. 2. Moral exploration. Following the disclosure, the investigator introduces a moral justification, portraying the offense through a sympathetic lens and potentially deflecting blame onto external factors. 3. Minimizing suspect denials. Upon suspect's request to speak, typically to deny accusations, the investigator dissuades such denials. Innocent suspects are unlikely to progress past this stage. 4. Addressing objections. If denial attempts fail, the suspect may raise objections to assert innocence. The investigator accepts these objections without dispute, using them to further shape the moral narrative. 5. Focus and engagement. The investigator actively engages the suspect, redirecting their attention towards understanding the moral narrative rather than fixating on potential consequences, utilizing physical proximity and thematic emphasis. 6. Passive mood management. In the presence of a passive demeanor, the investigator intensifies the presentation of the moral narrative, maintaining empathy and urging truthfulness. 7. Offering alternatives. Presenting 2 choices, both assuming guilt. The investigator guides the suspect towards choosing the more understandable alternative, reinforcing the moral narrative. 8. Reinforced admission. Upon suspect's admission of guilt, the investigator promptly acknowledges and reinforces this admission, seeking a brief oral overview of the offense before delving into detailed questioning. 9. Confession documentation. The investigator documents the oral confession into a written or recorded format for official record-keeping. Emotional approaches. Emotional approaches involve eliciting an emotional response from the subject while offering certain incentives. These approaches encompass several strategies: emotional pride and ego up. The subject is flattered to extract information, boosting their ego with a respectful tone. Compliments about their skills or achievements may be employed to encourage cooperation. Emotional pride and ego down. The questioner undermines the subject's self-esteem by criticizing their loyalty, intelligence, abilities, appearance, or other perceived weaknesses. Defending against these attacks may prompt the subject to provide information. Emotional fear up. The interrogator must avoid direct threats but can capitalize on justified fears, such as the risk of harm to the subject or their loved ones if they don't cooperate. Non-specific fears, like suggesting potential consequences, can also be employed. Emotional fear down. The interrogator reassures a fearful subject through verbal and physical actions, positioning themselves as a protector to calm the subject. Emotional love. The questioner emphasizes sincerity and conviction to persuade the subject to cooperate. Examples include promising the opportunity to reunite with family, contribute to ending conflict, protect comrades, serve one's country, or support one's ethnic group. Emotional hate. The questioner convinces the subject that cooperation will harm their enemies. However, the manual prohibits promising the denial of surrender opportunities or mistreatment to the enemy. Emotional futility. The interrogator uses factual information to convince the subject that resistance is futile, often combined with another emotional approach, such as emotional love, to reinforce the message. Peace. The peace method is a structured approach to investigative interviewing consisting of 5 stages aimed at building rapport and eliciting a comprehensive account of events from a suspect. Unlike the aggressive and accusatory nature of the Reid technique, peace fosters a dialogue between the investigator and the suspect. The peace technique consists of the following stages: planning and preparation. Investigators gather information about the incident, identify interviewees, and determine interview objectives. Engage and explain. Establishing rapport is pivotal in this stage. Investigators show concern for the suspect's well-being, address them respectfully, inquire about their comfort level, and offer reassurance if needed. Account, clarification, and challenge. The interviewer allows the suspect to provide an uninterrupted account of events. Follow-up questions are then used to clarify and expand on the narrative. Contradictory information may be challenged if necessary. Closure. The interviewer summarizes the suspect's account, ensuring mutual understanding of the events discussed. Any remaining topics are addressed, and agreement is reached on what has been covered. Evaluation. The interviewer assesses the success of the interview, considers new information obtained, and reflects on the effectiveness of their approach. Adjustments for future interviews may be identified. Cognitive interview. To aid crime victims and eyewitnesses in recalling accurate information about a crime, police employ a technique known as cognitive interviewing. Instead of directly asking about the incident, cognitive interviews prompt individuals to recollect other details from the time of the event. Questions may seem trivial, such as inquiries about the weather. Interviewees are encouraged to divulge all recollections, even the seemingly insignificant ones. A key tactic involves prompting the victim or eyewitness to describe what they heard or saw during the events in question. This method aims to enhance memory recall and minimize the risk of providing inaccurate information. Separation. The purpose of the separation technique is to isolate the detainee, preventing communication with other detainees to hinder the acquisition of counter-resistance methods. This method can be complemented by futility, incentive, or fear-up approaches. However, it's crucial to ensure the detainee receives 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep every 24 hours. There are 2 forms of separation. 1. Physical separation. This method prevents the detainee from communicating and is initially limited to 30 days. Approval from an officer of the rank 06 or above is required. 2. Field expedient separation. This approach aims to prolong the shock of capture by employing goggles or blindfolds and earmuffs to impede communication for up to 12 hours. Additionally, these tools can be used for security purposes during transit and evacuation. However, the use of hoods, sacks, over the head, duct tape, or adhesive tape over the eyes is prohibited. Field interviews. Police have the option to conduct informal interrogations, known as field interviews, without making arrests. These interviews occur outside of police stations and are typically unstructured, determined by the discretion of the interviewing officer. For instance, a casual conversation with an officer during a traffic stop constitutes a field interview. As a general guideline, any question posed by a police officer beyond inquiries about your name and address should be regarded as part of a field interview.